Sheila here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Mercury Hour, and this is Mars Night. Mercury is with Black Moon Lilith retrograde, and we're talking about the Ming family as the Sun ingressed into Sagittarius. Sun is ruling midheaven at 7 degree Leo. Ascendant is ruled by Mars, which is also in Sag, and Jupiter is 24 degrees Cancer retrograde. Moon 19 degrees Sagittarius in the second house. So we were talking about the West and the looting of the lodges, and basically a little bit of predictions to the real estate owned by the lodges, including monasteries and so on and so forth. And then I was moving to the East and talking about the Ming family. So I stopped at talking about the fact that emperors were taught both that the sky is punishing the land when needed, and that was the excuse also for men to beat women and to mistreat women. So very patriarchal, and at the same time, they knew that when an emperor is assassinated, is because they lost the mandate of the heaven. So basically, an emperor would get into a double bind where all the teachings that they were taught was basically to sleep with children, very young girls, marry them, siphon their energy, and build the dynasty. Now, the Mings were no different, and then they ended up being executed as a family. Now, I don't know if it was okay to execute them as a family, okay, but the execution of the Ming dynasty could be considered globally as the mark of what we call the French Revolution, when the French Revolution was. Now, I don't know about the current Chinese government. Do they treat women well? I don't think they treat them well enough. Is it safe to be a single woman in China? Do they change the culture of leftover wife for a woman who's not marrying in child weddings? Are child weddings abolished? Maybe yes, maybe no, okay? Now, is the culture of using dark occult and medical curses prevalent in China? Is there something done to abolish that, if it is prevalent? And the world is going to know, because China is kind of taking over the world. The surveillance culture, the no-touch torture, the death vans. I'm not even talking Falun Gong, okay? Now, it's not things that the West doesn't do. None of that, okay? No-touch torture, done by the West. Death vans, done by the West. Why all these BIPOC children being kidnapped? Organ harvesting, done by the West. Not allowing people to do yoga, done by the West. Labor camps, death camps, done by the West. The only type of government where, and even if the government is decentralized, the only type of government where, when it's not being re-elected, they can simply cycle home, do some yoga, have a natural tea, and go back to working in the private sector if they feel like, or retire. But for them to retire, they have to have housing, they're being able to travel. They need to be able to retire and live a good life. Also the women, also the people. You see, most of the people that they're bothered about not retiring, like myself, we were ready to retire. I say, how come you were ready to retire before 40? Did you know what I went to buy that? And I wasn't ready to retire because I didn't want to work. I was ready to retire because I saw there's so much resistance for me to work. I'm like, okay, then I retire. I sat with the neighbors, drank some coffee. There was no retirement plan. Because every time I try to up jump my business, I'm being attacked. Like you would think, what line of, and the reason that I was being attacked is not because it's because I don't work with the mafia. Now, if the mafia wants to stop being mafia and have business models that actually honors well-being, not money launderers, not this hand here, hand there, honors well-being, remediates that karma, the trafficking timelines, remediates those things, abolish ritual abuse. I have no problems with that. I support that. And I don't mean that type of mafia. I mean the type of mafia that wants people to, to do something with children on camera for them. Because I did not rape a child, not only on camera, even when there weren't cameras, I wasn't raping a child. And there was so much surveillance on me. That's and because I don't think I was born into life without surveillance. But in any case, I was not exactly my. If the people that want to harm children and get away with that, they are welcomed, as long as they do it on camera so that they are extortable, so that they can trust them. Because how will they trust someone if they don't have something on them? Now, what do they trust them with? Doing crime and not telling. When other people, how can they mingle with society? If you want to live in a good neighborhood, how will you mingle with society if they got something on them, they got something, everybody got something on everybody? Then nobody will say anything when somebody does something, and they can trust one another. And even then, because it's a treason cult, they still kill one another. And I'm not talking, I'm talking Aspen, I'm talking Monaco. Saint Bart's, Saint. I'm talking Epstein Island. You could not be, and we will soon find out that you could not be in any sector without being in it. And then when a person says no, why don't people want to work? When will you have children? Oh, they're living with their parents because they ran away from human trafficking. And all one can do is wait for them to kill one another. Now, here is the thing. It's losing of the logic o'clock. Now, for the more Chinese side, the key factor that I identified is their thought, yes, that if an emperor is being murdered, and that pertains to a decentralized government. I think when they were killing the Ming family, it was also like with the. Okay, not really. Here's the thing about China. It's like you can't know too much about China. Not from the West. Not from the West. So if a regime has the reputation of, well, how you feel about your government, I can't complain, then what does it look like? There's Chinese culture, there's Chinese tradition, there's all the richness of. Well, literally ask a 12, 13 years old child that goes to Park HaYarkon in Israel to see the Falun Gong ads. Now, the Falun Gong is very likely a cult that did medical experiments on its own people and then sold them to organ harvesting and then saved China. But China accepted the sale. Now, there are so many. You see, now I see this shorts about each time a different community in China, and they always focus on the communities that are like, the equality between men and women and so on. So, fantastic. We need to see that in practice. If we are a colony of China, which practically we are, okay, broadcasting from the Middle East, Palestinians can attest. We are a colony of China. Now, fantastic. We want to see more of that men-women equality. We want to see more of those human rights thingy. Okay, where the sense of community allows everyone to be an individual. Okay, that's capitalizing on Middle Eastern men being pigs is not, will not keep people from rebelling. And it's those pigs that will rebel. They will not be satisfied with that. They will want to loot more and loot more and loot more. Yeah, I try to speak to the colonizers and find common ground. I don't know. Um, now, and this is why what my skill is to identify on a belief level what could create something that a Genghis Khan would tap into, and we know that Genghis Khan, I call them K Ultra today, would tap into and try to capitalize on. Um, and the number one thing here is that the sky punishes the land. And now it is derived from looking at nature. And this is where, yes, what was the first? Yeah. So it is derived from seeing how harsh the winters can be in certain areas in China. Um, and and this is where we, if we look at the winter in China, we understand where is the notion that the sky punishes the land come from. But this is only from our perspective as people, because the frost is actually preserving the evergreen forest. It doesn't preserve. I mean, if there was a person that gone missing in in ice and then they lived kind of like an accidental Disney. um, but we think about this as punishing of the land and of something that is actually not a punishment. Now, I know it's very difficult to tell a person that could die in the winter that the sky doesn't punish the land. And because the person sees themselves as a part of the land. And they definitely don't want to think that the sky here, which they're very intimately connected with, is doing that for their benefit, because it's also not. So I understand the conundrum of being a human being in such extreme weather, and how does one navigate spiritually. But then the derivative is that men have the right to act like the sky acts in the winter to women, although the women are being called. So I don't know. um, but on that level, when the sky punishes the land, what it does is basically it's not the snow falling on the on. Okay, it's basically harming yin. And what are we gonna be? We're gonna have no yang left when we're harming yin. And this is why I say when it comes to leadership, the sky that punishes the land loses mandate of the people, be it the leader or the people. Loses mandate of the heaven. Sorry, it loses mandate of the heaven. The lunar eclipse takes the people, the solar eclipse takes the leaders. And leaders that are populist leaders affected by solar and lunar eclipses, um, affected by lunar eclipses more so than leaders that are not populist leaders. Okay? Why populist is the moon. And so, for government, decentral, or whatever structure of the government, um, for government to stay, to not lose mandate of the heaven, which means assassination in that case, then it needs to support the yin, not just the mothers. And that way, the yin can hold space for yang, and then they have sovereign. From our Western perspective, it would be seen as sovereign people interconnected. But more to the yin and yang, there would be a good, harmonious balance that maintains the kingdom. Now, with different planetary transitions, there are different adjustments that need to be done. And I see China, for example, having the windmills on mountains and isolated areas in places that are probably mingling well with the ecosystem. So there are a lot of things that China does that are very smart and are very beneficial to humanity. Um, that's the number one key. If they ask me, do you see Genghis Khan taking over China? And I would say, as long as they punish the land, as long as the sky punishes the land, all Genghis Khan has to do is to basically um, uh, not punish the land, okay, not harm women, and they will be taking over China. Now, I do see the social engineering, and by that I mean the content creation coming from China about tribes that have more equal relations between men and women. I see the younger people in China having more rest, which is actually more traditional. Okay, the way of the East is without effort, and without effort, and to make things happen by adapting to nature rather than by forcing it on nature is very different from, let's say, Western esoterics that can succumb to trying to command nature. And I think we all have to learn from that, because when we command nature, actually Christopher Warnock, who's coming from Sufi tradition, he talks about it to a state that I think could be extreme, because it could accept certain things that we don't need to accept. Um, but the fact that if we, I don't know, ask a planet and by force command the planet to do something, then even if we give something in return, they would do it in the way that they know how to do it. So let's say, I don't know, if we asked for Mars for real estate, then we'd have to take a look at where Mars is, but Mars could create a war, or Mars could, okay, Mars could do Genghis Khan. It's like, okay, is it safe for a woman to live in that city? No. Okay, then destroy all the city, save the woman and those women that are in favor of her living safe and free. Okay? Or save the women and the children, loot the city. But those women and children can't be traded, they can't be trafficked. Otherwise, the person that looted the city, or the tribe, or the monarchy, or the dynasty is. Now, here's the thing, it doesn't necessarily happen immediately. There would be something, let's say it happens with the middle decan of Libra. Sun was in Libra when they looted the city. Amazing. Next year they could also be conquered. But they would need the sun, and they would need the, I think, Alkaid. Okay, so when the yogas arrive, then happens to them. Okay? So, now the MK Ultra and MK Often are trying to do Genghis Khan, but here is the thing about that: they can't be the crimes that you use as an excuse to conquer land. They can't be done within your domain, because you're supposed to basically live better with the land. Okay, if it comes to that kind of like Sodom and Gomorrah, then yes, those places will be ravished, but you can't like, if you ravish them by raping people, then you're not offering anything better to the land than the people that lived there previously. For example, when the tribes took over United States, some of the Americans were being cannibalized there. Like something happened before they decided the wild, raging takeover. The natives tell that when the Americans came, they when then the Americans when the immigration from Europe and Britain came to United States, what today, or came to the Native America, then the natives say a lot of them just came up with diseases and bacteria that they didn't know, and they did not have the medicine for. Okay, because they did not know what it is, and they did not have the medicine for that. Now, some of those tribes, upon encounters with strangers, they were benefic, and some of those tribes, when they understood that those people are going to need land, they were also cannibalizing on their enemies as they did with one another. Okay? Now, eventually, United States abolished slavery. As terrible as it may be, the Jesuits are not worse than indigenous practices. And this is what we need to understand about Native America. Okay, the training of the shamans and the healers, the two spirits, they would be raped. The two spirits would be raped sometimes. Not in all tribes, there are many cultures. But there's a reason why, and I remember I talked about it, there's a reason why I remember the Choctaw, because they killed all the rest. Now, even with the Jesuits, the abolishing of slavery was better for the land. Now, the Native Americans know that, and they still try to regain their, there's a lot of land returning happening, because indeed United States is no longer better for the land. And this is also why those things, we see them as being allowed more and more. But when they talk about traditional gender roles, okay, there's nothing wrong with people that choose traditional gender roles, but that is something that makes Native America susceptible to invasion, and I think they know that. People are people are people are people are people, okay? And the bloodline division probably has its merit with special qualities or special traditions. At the same time, when we put one bloodline over another, like as the caste system that is getting less legitimization, and probably was, what type of empire was colonizing India? A class-based empire. That's the British Empire. I don't know what happened in Indonesia and Suriname. I remember when I was in between houses in Netherlands, and there was a Suriname lady that her husband just left her in the winter. She could die in the winter, she could be trafficked, she could be organ harvested, that guy knew that. He just left her in the winter, closed the door on her, and then she needed a shelter. And she studied to be a social worker. She said, maybe I will be your social worker. And I'm like, if she only knew what social workers have to do. But um, but you know, and it's like you can't. It's kind of like it's not the time to say that, because she's like so excited about her dreams and goals, and I'm like supposed to be supporting her dreams and goals, and I'm like, well, you're gonna have to abolish ritual abuse and trafficking children, and you're gonna be asked to do stuff to children so that you can keep a job, and I don't know, but when the lady just tried to get a house, and it's at the time to say it. So it was a Suriname man. Yes, indeed, the Dutch occupation was extremely cruel. It's even considered extremely cruel relative to the others. Either it's because Britain was a bigger empire and could have better PR, um, but then the House of Orange has the White House, so um, um, Algeria and France, China and United States, China and Israel and Palestine. Now, how is Israel like China? It's a very community-based society, but incredibly patriarchal. Horribly surveillance. cultures of surveillance, way too much dark occult. Okay, they help one another, but then there are all these issues that China also has. Organ harvesting that up until China came around we didn't even know about. If a person is doing yoga, they would ask him if he were. If a person, when I was digging my half moons, there was a Orthodox family that asked me if I worship the land. And I said, first of all, without God, we wouldn't be having that conversation. So they relaxed, and I said the times of the moon are just the times where it's better to plant crops. Yes, but the God created the thing, and so on and so forth, and they were happy and satisfied, and they were like, okay, you're selling the place. Then they got to the real point. You're selling. Because they wanted to build another complex on that and then sell it and so on, but they would lose their greenery. Because you can't worship the land. So this is where, if Israel is being colonized, it's colonized by United States, because Israel is indeed like a startup nation and so on and so forth. But then all the problems of China are also in the United States. and United States being colonized by China, and China being colonized by United States, and China colonizing Israel, but Israel is kind of considered a military basement of United States. Um, and the way they treat women is the way that they're being conquered. How do you kill an emperor? You run an extortion cult, you get them to sleep with a child, you film that, you get information about them, you surveil them, you send children to plant urges in them, you assassinate them. Now, if you run the extortion cult that does that, then what happens? The sky that punishes the land loses the mandate of the heaven. Good morning, you're also assassinated. And it's just a natural evolution of things that those that harm yin are left with nothing to hold space for yang. And that's pretty much the time that we're coming about. And those that unite themselves around harming women end up in mass graves. They're, they're definitely setting themselves in stone. Those who stone women, how do you think that those people will die? Mercury with Lilith is reminding us and opposing Uranus, ruling over Sedna. There was a lot of Sedna energies. And I remember I was sleeping and I saw a car and it had people in it think it was men in it, and suddenly one of the men turned into something like, these things that, it's a type of cabbage. And then he exploded. He turned into a cabbage and exploded. And I'm like, oh wow, this is a sadness story, because those men that do that, they cause world hunger. So the men were turning into cabbages and then being exploded. And when it exploded, it was like you explode a fungi. It's something that gave this dusty thingy. And so what I saw is that these men that were, and these men were like, these men could either be men that went through ritual abuse and would harm the farms, or these men were children or something like that, or that these men were men that were, how should I say that? These men died with the crops, is what I saw, but this was because of trafficking of women. Okay, because these men were bringing. Okay, they were like the sky that punishes the land. They were common people. They were commoners, but they grew up on culture of harming women, and immediately I saw a sadness story of how these men go with the food, with the famine. The men go. The men die. And okay, the man was turning into a cabbage, and then he exploded. It was like a fungal, because what he had in his head was like fungi, and then he exploded. But it's with the food, because in his head he had the destruction of the food. Those were men, when they in United States, although these men they seemed like um, they seemed like BIPOC people, but there were women that there were men that were mistreating women, and I saw very clearly that they go out with the food. Okay, that they will. And another thing is that, and they were exploding in their cars. Their heads were exploding in their cars. They were turning into cabbages and exploding. And another thing that when they removed the food stamps in the United States, the black men said that they will get some love from women finally, because women don't have food. They were seeking to traffic women. They were thinking that for food, women would do that. Those men and their thoughts are going poof like the fungi that because they were thinking to cause famine in order for women to go and be trafficked. They and the women that are trafficking with them are going to die by the masses. They're going to be like the dust in the wind. Because when somebody rapes, the food does not even absorb. You know, a lot of people that went to rape, they can barely eat, or and then they think, oh, we'll take the food from the women so that the women will traffic themselves for this, for that. Then these men, they die, and I saw they were turning into this cabbage that was, as it exploded, it was like white dust, like a fungi that explodes. Why? Because what these men do, they do rituals. They get paid to do rituals, to rape women. But they try to put it only on the BIPOC people. It's not only the BIPOC people. They think that they can punish women for being women, for being over nothing. Because if a woman is not to their sensual pleasure, and they try to control over that, they're going to die like that cabbage. There's no nourishment even, like the dust. And this is because they violate sexual sovereignty in the astral. And they think they have some right to rape someone under any circumstances, even hidden, even in the astral. So suddenly they're gonna be famine, and suddenly they're gonna be dead, and this and that. And it's like, oh, why did this happen? They know why it happened, because they were doing those rituals. Because they were raping. And I'm not talking about the BIPOC people, white psychologists. People that want to look like they mingle with the people, that they are themselves racist as fuck, but they want to look like they mingle with the people. And they hold extortion cults, trafficking cults, with Epstein-like things. But then they go for the academia, and they are lecturers, because they want to siphon the energy from the students for their death cults. And take the ability to have a house, living conditions, and so on from the people. Like, how should I say that? They try to shame people for existence because they try to make people accept the crimes that they do, and try to make people to feel that they're to blame for nothing. They try to blame shift because they know that what they do. Now, here's the thing: because when they were the children that were raped, it was done by their mentors, by their teachers, by the this, by the that, and they did not rebel them. They need to rebel their mentors and their teachers and so on and so forth, but they go to the person that was the student, or they go to a person that speaks their mind but is not working with those codes, is not siphoning energy. And because they don't, they try to target them. Because they try to be like the teachers, like the this, like the that, and try to make a person feel to blame that they exist, that they don't go with these trafficking cults. This only showing that, yes, we understand how 2 generations of this turned into mass graves. And all that they thought to get from that, for the monasteries, the museums, the mythical structures of mythical importance, and with Saturn and Neptune is going to be stealth wealth, hospitals, and structures of mythical importance. It's those people that harass, that go against the people, and they usually do it to who? To people that are, that are sovereign, that are they just go by. It's not to people that are even looking for company, in that sense that, okay, or people that can't go it alone and so on and so forth. But they try to keep a person from having a company that is actually a good company, or relationship that's actually happy and thriving. Venus ingress to 19 degrees Scorpio. Now here's the thing. Those people, they created the imprisonment system and the juristic system. And they created it as punitive. They created it as torturous. Now they know that it's their time to do time in that system that they created. And they try to drop it on the people that, to begin with, never saw jails or hospitals or mental hospitals as a place where to punish or to torture. So it's not their karma. It's not their life trajectory. The other way around, they were talking against these type of practices. And they were not talking but raping on the other hand. Now they are trying to have power over the people that never disempower them. And all of those projections, I'm sorry, when a child crosses the street and people project on her like, do something about the trafficking codes, do something about child trafficking. You know that these children have handlers. One of your crew was with a child, got extorted, and another, then another. Why you keep sending people to get extorted? Because that's your culture? Why don't you unite and do something against, when Annika Lucas said, how come nobody of those new people, and they were coming from the Masons, from secret societies, how come those people new to the network, how come none of them said, I can't do it to a child? And her handlers tortured her to plant urges in them to rape her. How come nobody talked about the fact that there are handlers that do that? From them, it's their interest to not be extorted. And then they would see a child and project on this child powers that the child doesn't have. And they would see a woman and project things on her that's nothing to do with who she is. And then when they loot that lodge, now, it's always going to look like a church, a synagogue, a mosque. And it burns down to the ground. Oh my God, they killed all these people that came to pray. Pray for whom? What about all these children that were killed? What about all these women that were trafficked? What about all these boys that were raped? But nobody rebelled. Their priest, their imam, their rabbi, or their teacher, or their youth movement commander. But in the army, they shoot the soldiers, they shoot the commanders. They don't want to go to war. They try to program people that they will be happy to rape, happy to this, happy to that. Oh, it's a celebration. They're going to rape, to this, to that. No, it's not. And then when they're war criminals, it's like, oh my God. They were told that, oh, it's allowed to rape at war. Then when they're war criminals, oh no, we're being persecuted. They're not being persecuted. You raped people.